So you've given us a real mountain of information here, articles, studies, even some of your own theories about clear thinking and good decision-making.
Mm.
Looks like our mission with this deep dive is going to be picking out the most useful parts,
Yeah.
so you can absorb the knowledge quickly and thoroughly without getting bogged down.
Yeah, you got it. And a lot of your material comes from this book, The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. It's really great. It goes deep into all these common cognitive errors. Basically, this whole deep dive should help you become much more aware of these biases.
Okay, awesome. So let's get right to it with a tricky one. Survivorship bias. Now we see success stories everywhere. The tech entrepreneurs, the authors who hit the bestseller list, the artists who make it big. It's exciting for sure, but it also messes with our perception of reality.
Right. I mean, how much time does the media really spend looking into all the people who failed? You know, the people who tried just as hard and didn't get anywhere.
Dobelli uses that example. He talks about how we don't see the graveyards of the unsuccessful. It's like this illusion. He calls it the Quimmer's body illusion.
Yeah, that's a good one. We look at these athletes with amazing physiques and we think, oh, all that training got them there. But a lot of times they were already built that way.
Right, it was already in their genes, their body type. That's why they were good at swimming in the first place. It wasn't just the training.
Think about it. It's like those models in the ads. You see them with perfect skin, great hair, and you think, it must be because of the products they're using. But those models were chosen for their looks.
Right. They were already beautiful. That's why they got the job. The cosmetics might not even be doing that much.
Exactly.
So how do we counteract this survivorship bias? I think we need to look at the other side of the coin. We need to learn about the projects that failed, businesses that went bankrupt, careers that never took off. That will give us a more balanced view.
I agree. I mean, you really have to make a conscious effort to seek out that kind of information. It's not the exciting stuff, but it's important.
Okay, let's talk about the clustering illusion. This one is all about seeing patterns where there aren't any, like shapes in the clouds.
Yeah, or like Dobelli's example of Friedrich Jorgensen, the opera singer. He was convinced he could hear secret messages in bird songs.
It's like our brains crave order, so we try to impose it onto random events.
Right.
We find meaning in pure coincidence.
Totally.
So what's the lesson here for our listeners?
Well, just because you see what looks like a pattern doesn't mean it's actually meaningful. Sometimes things just happen randomly.
Okay, good point. Now let's move on to social proof. This is a really powerful one. We tend to do what we see other people doing.
Right, especially when we're not sure what to do ourselves.
Exactly. Like if you're walking down the street and you see a bunch of people staring up at something, what do? You look up too.
I do, yeah. It's like a survival instinct, right? If everyone's doing something, it must be important or safe, even if you don't know why.
I guess so. Dobelli has some pretty relatable examples, like clapping at a concert. You might not have loved the music, but if everyone else is cheering, you clap along too.
Or tipping. Even if you feel like the service wasn't great, you still leave a tip because that's what everyone else is doing.
Right. And marketers use this all the time. They know that if they can show that lots of people love their product, we're more likely to buy it.
Definitely.
So for you listening, it's important to ask yourself, am I doing this because it makes sense, or am I just following the crowd?
You got it.
All right, next up we have the sunk cost fallacy. This one is so common.
Yeah, it's a classic.
So what happens is you keep putting more into something, time, money, effort, even when it's not working anymore.
Right, because you've already invested so much, it's tough to let go.
You feel like you have to keep going. But really, you're just throwing good money after bad. You ever sit through a terrible movie just because you already bought the ticket?
Yeah, I have.
That's the sunk cost fallacy. Dobelli talks about this manager who keeps pouring money into a failing ad campaign because we've already invested so much.
It's like he's forgetting that the money is gone. Those past investments shouldn't affect future decisions.
I know. And it can even happen in relationships. You stay in an unhappy relationship for years just because you've already invested so much time and emotion.
Right, you think, I can't give up now after all this time. But sometimes cutting your losses is the best thing you can do.
So think about if there's anything in your life right now that you're holding on to, just because of the sunk cost. And think about whether it's really worth it.
Okay, good advice.
Now, let's talk about reciprocity. You know that feeling of wanting to return a favor, even if it's for something you didn't ask for?
Yeah, like when those charities send you free address labels or greeting cards.
Right. Dobelli talks about that. He says even though he knew what they were doing, he still felt obligated to donate.
It's funny how it works.
It's hardwired into us. I mean, it's part of human nature to want to reciprocate. But you have to be careful because it can be used against you.
Yeah, like in negotiations or sales, people will often try to do you a favor, so you feel obligated to give them what they want.
So be aware of that. Don't feel pressured to automatically return every favor, especially if it's something you didn't want in the first place.
Good advice.
Now we're going to talk about what Dobelli calls the mother of all misconceptions.
Oh boy, this is a big one.
Confirmation bias. This is our tendency to look for information that confirms what we already believe and to ignore anything that challenges it. It's like wearing blinders.
It's like a filter on reality. We're drawn to information and opinions that reinforce our existing beliefs, and we just tune out the rest.
Dobelli quotes Warren Buffett here. He says that we're experts at interpreting new information so that our prior conclusions remain intact. Isn't that wild?
It is.
It's like you can find a news article or an expert opinion to support almost any view, whatever you already believe, whether it's about politics or health or anything else.
And the problem is, if you only listen to people who agree with you, you're never going to learn or grow. You're stuck in an echo chamber.
Right. So I challenge everyone listening to this. Actively look for information that challenges your beliefs. It might be uncomfortable, but it's so important. It's the only way to really see the whole picture.
Well said.
Next, we're going to discuss authority bias. This is our tendency to trust authority figures even if they don't know what they're talking about.
Right. Even experts can be wrong.
Totally. Dobelli talks about how most economists didn't predict the 2008 financial crisis. And those are supposed to be the experts on the economy.
Yeah, but it makes sense, right? We're taught to respect authority from a young age. We look up to doctors, lawyers, professors. We think they know better than we do.
And all these visual cues for authority, too. White coats, suits, uniforms, fancy titles.
And today we even have new ones, like how many followers you have on social media, whether you have a book deal or a podcast.
Right. But it's important to remember that none of those things guarantee that someone is actually right. I mean, think about it. Just a few hundred years ago, doctors thought bloodletting was a good idea. So question authority. Don't just blindly accept what someone says just because they have a title or a uniform. Think for yourself.
Okay, good advice.
Next up is the contrast effect. This is how we judge things based on what we compare them to. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Dobelli talks about the story of two brothers who own a clothing store. They figured out that if they showed you an expensive suit first, the less expensive one would seem like a bargain.
It's so clever.
Yeah, right.
Like that experiment where you put one hand in ice water and the other in hot water, and then you put both in lukewarm water.
The lukewarm water will feel different depending on which hand you use.
Exactly. Our perception is all relative. It affects how we see everything from prices to beauty to the size of things.
Totally. Retailers use this all the time. They know that if they put a more expensive item next to a cheaper one, the cheaper one will seem more appealing.
So for you listening, be aware of the context. What are you comparing something to? Is it a fair comparison? Are you being manipulated?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about availability bias now. This one is about how we tend to overestimate the likelihood of things that are easy for us to remember.
Right. It makes sense, right? If something is easy to recall, it feels more common.
Exactly. Dobelli talks about how people might say flying is safe because they've never been in a plane crash or that their neighborhood is dangerous because they heard about one robbery. But those things might not actually be true.
Yeah, if something is particularly vivid or emotional, we're more likely to remember it and think it happens more often than it does. Like you see a news report about a shark attack and suddenly you're terrified of swimming in the ocean, even though it's statistically very unlikely to happen.
Right. So it's important to think critically about the information you're getting and not just jump to conclusions based on a few dramatic stories, especially when it comes to news.
Totally. News tends to focus on rare and sensational events because that's what grabs people's attention. But that can give you a very skewed view of the world.
Next up is the it'll get worse before it gets better fallacy. You ever heard that one?
Oh, yeah, it's a classic.
It's when someone tries to justify a bad situation by saying that things have to get worse before they can get better.
It's often used as a way to deflect blame or avoid taking responsibility.
Exactly. Dobelli uses the example of a doctor who gives you a treatment that makes you feel worse and tells you, don't worry, this is a sign it's working.
Or a consultant who comes into a company and tells them they need to make some drastic changes that will initially hurt their profits. But don't worry, it's all part of the plan.
But how do you know if they're telling the truth?
Yeah, It's true.
I mean, sometimes things do have to get worse before they can get better.
Yeah,
But it's also a very convenient excuse for people who don't know what they're doing.
true.
So how can you protect yourself from this fallacy?
Yeah.
Ask for specifics. Ask for a timeline. Ask what evidence they have to support their claims. Don't just take their word for it.
Good advice.
Okay, moving on to story bias. This one is about how much we love stories. We want to make sense of the world. We want to connect the dots and see a clear narrative.
Right. Even if it means twisting the facts a bit.
Dobelli quotes E.M. Forster here. He gives these two sentences. The king died, and then the queen died. And the king died, and then the queen died of grief.
The second sentence is more interesting, right? It tells a story.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we don't know if it's true, it just feels more satisfying. And think about advertising. It's all about telling stories, creating emotional connections to products.
Definitely.
Like that Google ad where the guy uses Google searches to document his whole relationship with his wife.
Yeah, those are so powerful.
I know. It makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside and want to use Google.
Yeah, right.
But the problem is, stories can be misleading. They can oversimplify things, leave out important details, and reinforce stereotypes.
They can also make us remember things that didn't actually happen.
So what's the takeaway here? Be critical of stories. Don't just accept them at face value. Ask yourself, is this really the whole story? Is there another side to this?
Yeah, good point.
Now, let's talk about hindsight bias.
Oh, the I knew it all along phenomenon.
Exactly. It's that feeling we get when something happens and we think, oh yeah, I totally saw that coming. But did you really?
Yeah, probably not.
It's easy to look back on the past and see everything is inevitable. But at the time, the future was uncertain.
Dobelli uses the example of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914. It's easy to look back and say, oh, well, of course that was the start of World War I. But no one knew that at the time.
Right. So the lesson here is to be humble about your ability to predict the future. Don't get too cocky.
Yeah, good advice.
Okay, let's move on to the overconfidence effect.
Yeah.
This one is about how much we overestimate our own abilities.
Yeah.
Dobelli mentions a study where people were asked to estimate things with 98% confidence, and they were wrong 40% of the time.
Wow.
I know. And there was this study where people were asked to rate themselves as drivers, and 93% of them said they were better than average.
Statistically impossible.
Right. And this happens all the time in business. New entrepreneurs are often overly optimistic about their chances of success. And major projects almost always go over budget and over time because people underestimate how long things will take and how much they'll cost. Interestingly, Dobelli points out that this effect is more pronounced in men.
Uh-huh.
So be aware of this bias, ask for feedback from others, challenge your own assumptions. You're probably not as great as you think you are.
Okay, good advice.
Now we're going to talk about chauffeur knowledge.
Yeah.
This one is about the difference between real knowledge and just knowing enough to sound smart.
Oh, yeah. Dobelli tells this great story about the physicist Max Planck. He was traveling around giving lectures, and his chauffeur started to memorize the lectures.
Wow.
Yeah. So one day the chauffeur said to Planck, hey, let's switch places. I'll give the lecture, and you can be the chauffeur. And Planck agreed. So the chauffeur gets up on stage and gives the lecture perfectly. But then someone in the audience asks a question.
Uh-oh. Did he know the answer?
Nope. He had no idea. He said, well, that's such a simple question. I'll let my chauffeur answer it.
That's so funny.
It is. So the point is, you can sound smart without really understanding something.
You can have all the right words, but not the deep knowledge behind them. And this happens a lot in business. People get promoted because they're good at presenting and talking, but they don't have the experience or the expertise to back it up.
Yeah.
This relates to something Warren Buffett says about having a circle of competence. Know what you know and stay in your lane. Don't pretend to be an expert in something you're not.
So true. And one way to tell if someone is a real expert is if they're willing to admit what they don't know.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the illusion of control.
Oh, this is a good one.
This is our tendency to think we have more control over things than we actually do. You know, like those people who wear their lucky socks to a game thinking it'll help their team win.
Yeah. Or people who think they can control the stock market by carefully timing their trades.
Right. But the truth is, a lot of things are just out of our control.
Yeah. We like to think we're in charge, but sometimes things just happen randomly.
And this can be dangerous because it can make us take unnecessary risks.
So how can we avoid this?
I think it's about being honest with ourselves about what we can and cannot control and focusing our energy on the things we can actually influence. Don't waste time trying to control the uncontrollable.
Good point.
Okay, next up is incentive super response tendency. This is the idea that people respond to incentives in predictable ways. Charlie Munger is a big proponent of this idea.
Yeah. If you want to understand why people do what they do, just follow the incentives.
Dull Belly has a bunch of examples. Like if you pay your salespeople solely on commission, they'll be motivated to sell as much as possible, even if it means selling things people don't need or ripping them off.
Or if you pay your CEO based on short-term stock performance, they'll be more likely to make risky decisions that could harm the company in the long run.
Exactly. So the lesson here is to always think about the incentives behind people's actions. What are they trying to achieve? What are they being rewarded for? It's really the key to understanding human behavior.
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about regression to the mean. This is a statistical concept, but it's really important for understanding how the world works.
Okay, so what is it?
It means that extreme events tend to be followed by more average events. So if you have an amazing year in business, it's likely that next year won't be as good.
Or if a baseball player has a record-breaking season, it's probably not going to happen again the next year.
Exactly. And the same goes for negative events. If you have a really bad year, chances are things will be better next year. It's just natural for things to even out over time.
Okay, but this doesn't mean you shouldn't strive for excellence or that you can't do better than average.
Right. But don't attribute every fluctuation to some specific cause or intervention.
It's like when a company is struggling and they bring in a new CEO. If the company starts doing better, everyone assumes it's because of the new CEO.
Right. But it could just be regression to the mean.
Yeah.
The company was due for a bounce back.
Exactly.
So be careful about jumping to conclusions. Look at the long-term trends, not just the short-term fluctuations.
Good point.
Now, let's talk about outcome bias. This one is really sneaky.
Okay, so what is it?
It's when we judge a decision based on the outcome, rather than the quality of the decision itself. Like imagine a surgeon who performs a risky surgery, and the patient survives. Everyone praises the surgeon for his skill and courage.
Right, a great outcome.
But what if the surgery was completely unnecessary? Or what if the surgeon made a bunch of mistakes during the surgery but got lucky and the patient pulled through anyway?
Oh, I see. The outcome was good, but the decision-making wasn't.
Exactly. So the lesson here is to focus on the process. Did you gather all the relevant information? Did you weigh the risks and benefits carefully? Were you thinking clearly at the time?
Yeah, good point.
Now we come to the paradox of choice.
Okay, this sounds interesting.
It's the idea that having more choices doesn't always make us happier. In fact, it can lead to anxiety and paralysis.
How can that be? I always thought more choices meant more freedom.
Me too. I mean, who doesn't love having options? But imagine going to a store and seeing a wall of 50 different kinds of jam. You'd probably spend an hour trying to decide which one to buy.
Yeah, that's true. I've definitely been in that situation.
And then when you finally choose one, you'd probably second-guess yourself and wonder if you picked the right one.
I get it.
Del Belly talks about how studies have shown that people are actually more likely to buy jam if there are only 6 options to choose from.
Interesting. I guess sometimes too much choice can be overwhelming.
Right. So the lesson here is sometimes less is more. Maybe try narrowing down your options before you get overwhelmed by a sea of choices.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to liking bias. This is the idea that we're more likely to be persuaded by people we like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's kind of obvious when you think about it. But we don't always realize how much this is influencing our decisions.
Like if you're buying a car and the salesperson is really friendly and charming, you might be more likely to buy from them even if their offer isn't the best.
Or if you're at a party and someone you're attracted to starts talking about politics, you might find yourself agreeing with them even if you don't usually share their views.
That's so true.
So be aware of this bias. Don't let your personal feelings cloud your judgment.
Right. Judge the product or the idea on its own merits, not on how much you like the person presenting it.
Now we're talking about the endowment effect. This is our tendency to overvalue things we own.
Okay, so explain that one.
It's like if you're selling your old car, you probably think it's worth more than someone else would be willing to pay for it.
I do that.
Or if you win a free mug in a raffle, you might refuse to sell it for $5 even though you wouldn't have paid $5 for it in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
Dobabelli says this is because owning something creates an emotional attachment. We see it as an extension of ourselves.
So how do we avoid this?
I think it's about trying to be more objective. When you're buying or selling something, ask yourself, what is the market value of this item? What would a neutral third party pay for it? Don't let your emotions inflate the price.
Good point.
Now let's talk about coincidence.
Oh, that one.
We all love a good coincidence, right? It's those moments when something seemingly impossible happens and we think, wow, what are the chances?
Like running into someone you know on the other side of the world.
Exactly. But the truth is that coincidences are a lot more common than we think.
Yeah, statistically speaking, there are so many people in the world and so many interactions happening every day that coincidences are bound to happen.
Right. Dobelli talks about the birthday problem.
Yeah.
If you have 23 people in a room, there's a 50-50 chance that 2 of them will share the same birthday.
Wow, that's wild.
It is. But it makes sense when you think about it. It's not that each individual birthday is that unlikely. It's just that with enough people, the odds of any 2 birthdays matching increase significantly.
So what's the takeaway here?
I think it's about not reading too much into coincidences. Just because something seems unlikely doesn't mean it's meaningful or that there's some hidden force at work. Sometimes things just happen randomly.
Good point.
Now we're going to talk about something called neglect of probability. It's a bit of a mouthful.
What's that one?
It's basically about how bad we are at understanding probability. Like, we tend to overestimate the risk of things that are really scary or dramatic, even if they're statistically unlikely.
Right, like plane crashes or terrorist attacks. We see those things on the news and we think, oh my God, I'm going to die. But the odds of those things actually happening to you are very low.
Dobelli mentions a study where people were asked to choose between 2 gambles. In one gamble, you had a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning $5,000. And in the other gamble, you had a 999 in 1,000 chance of winning $5. Most people chose the second gamble, even though the expected value of the first gamble is higher.
Why is that?
Because we're more afraid of losing $5 for sure than we are of missing out on a potential $5,000.
I see. Our emotions get in the way of our logic.
Exactly. So the lesson here is to try to be more rational about risk. Don't let your fears dictate your decisions. Look at the numbers. Look at the probabilities.
Okay.
Let's talk about scarcity error now.
Okay, this one sounds familiar.
This is about how we tend to value things more when they're scarce. Limited time offer, only a few left in stock.
Yeah, I see those everywhere.
Marketers use this all the time to create a sense of urgency and make us buy things we don't really need. It plays on our fear of missing out.
Right. And sometimes we even want things more just because they're forbidden or hard to get.
Dobelli calls this the Romeo and Juliet effect. The more our parents tell us we can't see someone, the more we want to see them. So next time you see something advertised as scarce or limited edition, take a deep breath and ask yourself, do I really need this? Don't let marketers manipulate you with their scarcity tactics.
Good advice.
Next up is base rate neglect. This one is about how we tend to ignore general statistical information in favor of specific details.
Okay, give me an example.
Ability talks about this guy named Mark. He's really shy, withdrawn, helpful, but not really interested in people or reality. He's meticulous and orderly and has a passion for detail.
Okay, so what kind of person do you think Mark is?
Is he a farmer, a librarian, a salesman, a pilot, or a physician?
Well, based on that description, I'd say he sounds like a librarian.
A lot of people say that.
Yeah.
But statistically speaking, there are way more farmers than librarians, so it's actually more likely that Mark is a farmer.
Oh, wow. So we tend to ignore the general statistics in favor of the specific detail.
Exactly. And this can lead us to make bad decisions, especially when we're dealing with stereotypes.
So how do we avoid this?
I think it's about trying to be more aware of the base rates. Ask yourself, what are the general probabilities in this situation? Don't just focus on the specific details of the case in front of you.
Okay, I'll try to do that.
All right, let's move on to the gambler's fallacy. This is the belief that past events can influence future random events.
Okay, so like if you flip a coin 5 times and it lands on heads each time, you think it's more likely to land on tails the next time.
Exactly. But the truth is, each coin flip is a completely independent event.
Right.
The coin has no memory. The odds of getting heads or tails are always 50-50, no matter what happened on the previous flips.
Right.
So the lesson here is, don't let your past experiences cloud your judgment when it comes to random events.
Good point.
Okay, let's talk about anchoring.
Okay, what is it?
It's about how our judgments can be influenced by arbitrary information,
Arbitrary information.
like random numbers or irrelevant facts. Dobelli gives the example of a study where people were asked to write down the last 2 digits of their Social Security number, and then they were asked to bid on a bottle of wine.
So what happened?
The people who wrote down higher numbers bid higher prices for the wine, even though their Social Security number had nothing to do with the value of the wine.
Wow, that's weird.
It is. It shows how easily our brains can be anchored to a particular number, even if that number is totally irrelevant.
So how do we avoid this?
I think it's about being aware of the power of anchors. When you're making a decision, especially one involving numbers, try to be conscious of any initial numbers you've been exposed to. And ask yourself, is this number really relevant? Am I letting it influence my judgment?
Good advice.
Okay, now let's talk about induction.
Okay.
This is about the dangers of drawing general conclusions from specific observations. It's like the classic example of the black swan.
Oh, yeah. For centuries, people in Europe believed that all swans were white. Why? Because all the swans they'd ever seen were white. But then they discovered black swans in Australia.
It blew their minds, right?
Basically.
It's a reminder that our experience is always limited and that there's always more to learn. So don't be too quick to assume that you know everything about a subject just because you've seen a few examples. Always be open to the possibility of being wrong.
Good point.
All right, now we're going to talk about loss aversion.
Okay.
This is the idea that we feel the pain of a loss more strongly than we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Like losing $10 feels worse than winning $10.
Exactly. And this can lead to all sorts of irrational behavior, like holding on to a losing stock for too long because you don't want to admit defeat, or refusing to sell your house even though the market is down because you don't want to take a loss.
I get that. I hate taking a loss.
Me too. But sometimes the best thing you can do is cut your losses and move on.
Right.
Now let's talk about social loafing.
Okay, so what's this one?
Have you ever noticed that when you're working in a group, some people just seem to slack off?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
That's social loafing. It's the tendency for people to put in less effort when they're part of a team than when they're working individually.
Why does that happen?
I think it's a few reasons. One is diffusion of responsibility. When you're in a group, you don't feel as personally accountable for the outcome.
Right, you figure someone else will pick up the slack.
Exactly. And also, there's the free rider problem. Some people just figure, hey, if I can get away with doing less work, why not?
It's so annoying.
It is. So how do we prevent this? I think it's about setting clear expectations, assigning specific roles to each team member, and making sure everyone feels accountable for their contribution. Regular check-ins can help. And celebrating successes as a team. That way, everyone feels like they're a part of something important and that their work matters.
Good advice.
Next, we have exponential growth.
What is that?
It's the way things grow at an accelerating rate, like compound interest, or the spread of adrenaline.